just a few ground rules. We'll try to be as quick as possible. We're not going to be answering any questions tonight. We're only going to be taking comments. And we'll try to look for a little more civility than we had at the last meeting. There's also going to be a 2-minute limit on speaking. You need to remember to sign in on the podium when I'm making comments. And I ask that you keep your comments to the regulations. If they don't stick to if the comments are not about the regulations, I'm going to ask you to stop. And if you don't want to stop, we're just going to take a recess. And we'll just do that all night long until at some point we're just going to close the meeting. So is there somebody who would like to start speaking? I believe Steve is.
Thank you. Steve Felsigno, 26 Dillon Road. So part of what I wanted to talk about, you just disavowed, so, which is fine. So I just have some questions I want to ask. First, I'd like to, my son also admonished that I shouldn't have anything typed out. I should read from my phone. So I'm going to try to read from my phone. First, I'd like to thank all the members of the commission for the time spent and the effort made to serve on this commission. I've been a member of the Board of Police Commissioners for 18 years and understand the amount of time that it takes for you to participate in something like this. But I have taken the time to read the 129 pages of regulations, and though I'm not a land use attorney, I do have some questions, and I apologize if they seem profound to read, but on land use, on the pages 20, 21, and 22, the tables, through everything that I've read, each item seems to have a acronym associated with it, and there's 3 or 4 that don't. I'd like the commission to take a look at this before they have a final vote. Just a few things that don't have any acronyms. One is residential kennels, affordable housing, though there's 7 or 8 pages devoted to affordable housing, multifamily dwellings, active adult communities, nursing care facilities, congregate communities, assisted living. And again, being a neophyte, I don't really know why there's no acronym associated with any of those items. I'm not sure I can ask that question, or you want to answer it, or, okay, fine. The other thing is, I understand that T4 has been excluded and taken out. What I am kind of curious about and don't understand, and would like at some point, before you take a vote, some sort of explanation so that I can personally understand it, is Development 1 and Development 2. The definitions in the front tables state limited residential and mixed-use configurations. And it also describes, I believe it's in Development 2, residential apartment style. So I'm just trying to understand what the mindset of the board is when those items come up. I'd like some, again, before you vote, I'd like to try to understand that, or maybe you can have some sort of summation on what the mindset or the thought process going forward might be on that. And then after reading and sifting through these regulations, I remember there was a reference made to a consultant that was hired. I'm curious on what the cost of the consultant was to the town, the overall cost. At some point, I'd like to know that. I don't know if I can find that out from town hall, or if that's something that someone's going to be able to get that number for the citizens of the town. The other thing observation I made was, after understanding that the person was from Hamden, it looked like a lot of the regulations from Hamden were kind of superimposed upon Woodbridge, and I understand Woodbridge, Hampton's a great community and has its own attributes, but I understand Woodbridge to have its own attributes, and I think when you're putting together planning and zoning regulations, that they should be definitive and distinct for Woodbridge, and accentuate the attributes that Woodbridge has. And the other, honestly, is just my opinion. If you want me to stop, I'll stop. But at the last meeting, there were references made to One Woodbridge, and I've lived here since 1964, and I can certainly attest to there not being one Woodbridge, that there really are two Woodbridges. And some of the things that I thought about when I thought about two Woodbridges is that a lot of these planning and zoning decisions that you make really indirectly may affect where I live, but I've lived in one Woodbridge as opposed to the other Woodbridge all my life. And I think what the people in Woodbridge need to appreciate is that the people that have lived in what we always call the flats, I mean, you have families like the Lucianis, you have families like the Anastasios, the Martinos. I mean, these people built this town. Anytime there was a ball field that needed to be fixed, they were the first ones. Anytime there was a church picnic that needed volunteers, they were there. All these people have been here to support this town for many, many years. And I think when you make decisions that are going to affect their property values, and when you make decisions that really they may not be 100% on board, I think some of the reasons is because there's no involvement. And one of the things that I thought about, and this is just a suggestion to all the boards, including the board that I'm on, is that we create these incendiary and contentious situations which could very easily be avoided. And the way they can be avoided is maybe just having a subcommittee when you make decisions that affect one particular section of town, by having 2 or 3 people from that area on a subcommittee so that you have some insight and perspective on what their needs or wants are. Because if you really think about it, and you think about the people that live in the district area of Woodbridge, without their tax base, Woodbridge would be paying an awful lot. And they put up with an awful lot. I mean, anytime there's any type of economic development, it gets shoved down there, or it's always talked about down there. Development 1, Development 2. Everything that I look at on that map is skewed exactly towards the lower area of Woodbridge. So I think we have to appreciate their situation and their perspective. And going forward, I think you just have to keep that in mind. So I know you're not answering any questions, but I proposed a few. And I hope before you make your decision, you think about it.
Is there anybody else that would like to make? Good evening. I don't think I can do anything in 2 minutes, especially when speaking, but I'll do my best. I did have questions. I'll propose them in any case, and maybe there could be some clarity at some point. Going through the regs, a few issues I have, Steve touched on a few. Your definitions about Dev 1, Dev 2. They're very different in front under 1.0 administration than they are at the chart. And I can give you the page of the chart I'm speaking of. Page 58, when it talks about bulk dimensional data, and it talks once again about the different districts, the different Dev 1, Dev 2, GBA, and B1. When you look on page 58 under that chart, those 4 districts have no numbers at the beginning where it talks about what most of us are here for, density, residential density.
NA is all I see. NA, NA, NA. Yet the rest of the chart is filled in, everything from setbacks to width of the property. And I'm wondering why they say NA, because if I'm a developer or anybody looking at your regs, I don't know what that means. Now, you may tell us at one point that that means we're sticking with the old regs. But if that's the case, why are there no numbers there? Does that mean there's no development allowed in all those districts? Because it's not what the definition in 1.0 administration on page 3 says. So it leaves it ambiguous. And I'm afraid that a developer or anybody may come and say, gee, looks like it's open game. It's fair game to project 10 units per acre, 4 units per acre. I don't know why just those sections don't have a density number put in there, either a minimum or a maximum, especially a maximum. Those areas are of great concern because we've already had a proposal in front of us a few times in front of you. There is a landowner now who owns 15 acres in one of those areas, in that one, who projected and proposed 137, 138 units, 55 and up at one point, then came back to the town a few years ago, proposed 150 rental units with no age restrictions. I don't know if this chart's telling them there's going to be no, other than the extension they received on their 55 and up housing. Does that mean for them, after that, there's nothing, they can't develop any houses? Or does it mean they can develop up to 10 units per acre? I just don't know. It's not clearly spelled out. So that's number one. Because I'm limited to 2 minutes, I'll stick to number 2.
I'll give you my 2.
Number 2 is I'm very concerned when you turn to page 6 on the definitions. There's a definition for accessory use. But a term you use multiple times in this document that affects me is not listed under definitions, and I'm wondering why. You use the terminology accessory apartments. Accessory apartments is listed under your charts and has another section, but yet isn't under the definition. I actually printed out the legal definition, the best I can find. I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to Google. And the definition for accessory apartment is quite different, actually, than in-law apartment. And I'm wondering, was this intended to be basically an in-law apartment, or is there a legal reason you decided to use the words accessory apartment? I don't know if the people in this room or people at home realize, but last meeting, Jeff, you did tell us that there was no actual difference to the density of town based on this document. And even if it was an in-law setup that are now being allowed, and I may agree with you that I would be appreciative of in-law setups, it's certainly a change in density, and especially if you put in the words accessory apartment. I find that to be more open-ended, and according to the legal definitions that I found, more acceptance of additional people density in town. And it doesn't have to be a family member. And the definition I found is very different. One has to be within the unit, and the other one is considered a second unit. So I'm wondering why you said there was no additional density being allowed with this document, but accessory apartment. And there is a whole section, and just for people who have the document in front of them, if you, let's see the page. If you go to page 40, under land uses 3.0, that first half of the page on the left-hand side is basically all addressing accessory dwelling units and an accessory apartment. So that is in addition to our density, whatever number that may be. And it also opens up the door, in my opinion, to maybe not quite what the town sees as an in-law apartment. So I realize you're not going to answer questions. I'm saddened by that. But I hope you give some consideration and maybe some explanation at one point to clarify why you use that definition, why it's not in your list of definitions in this document, and why some of those areas of the chart, Deb 1, Deb 2, GD, are not inclusive of a number of density population allowed, minimum or maximum. Thank you.
Ellen Parati, 38 Merritt Avenue. I'm just wondering, why do we keep coming to these meetings and there's no questions being answered? Is it the whole board that is not answering questions? I've gone up to some of you, like Andy, and we talked to a couple other people. They'll answer the questions. Why won't they answer questions in a formal setting? Why is it so backdoor? Why is everything so secretive? It's ridiculous. You're trying to wear us down so we don't keep coming to these meetings. There's a lot of elderly. You could shake your head. Why do you have to be so ignorant to us? For what reason are you shaking your head?
Stop now.
For what reason? For what reason? I'm an adult. You're not telling me what to do. You're ridiculous. You're shaking your head at every person that's been up here so far. Do you think you're better than us? Why are you shaking your head as I'm talking?
We're in a recess.
I don't care. I'm talking. You can get up and leave if you want.
I'm going to ask the cop.
Oh, I'm afraid of the cop. Call him. Call the cop. What's he gonna do? Take me out in cuffs?
If you don't...
You don't want to answer, then you should leave the room. It's ridiculous. We've been here, you know how many times? I have MS, I walk with a walker, I take monthly treatments, and I drag myself to these meetings to have you shake your head at me. Okay? I do 6 hours of treatment twice a month. I'm in a hospital hooked up to IV, and I'm going to come drag myself to a meeting for you to shake your head at me? You did it to every single person who's spoken tonight. You did it to Steve, you did it to Anthony, and now you're doing it to me. You're ridiculous, and you're very, very divisive.
Are you done?
No, I'm not. Are you?
Okay, well...
Take your recess and leave the room.
If you don't stop, we're going to close the hearing, and then no one else will get to speak.
Oh, okay, so you're going to try to shut everybody down. You're ridiculous.
It's your
You
choice.
shouldn't be on this committee. Oh, and just one last question. My maiden name's Martino. I'm a parodied out. We've been here way longer than you've been here. My uncle started the first firehouse. My uncle is the one who made the flats stay the flats and not go into New Haven. So you want to bring up some records? We'll put it against yours any day.
Frank DeLeo, 19 Newton Road.
We're in recess for another 3 minutes.
I know we're not supposed to ask questions, but I was wondering,
We're still in recess.
excuse me, we're still in recess? How long does the recess start?
We start at 5.
I'll stand until recess. I don't think.
10 minutes?
I suppose we should play, it's recess.
Ready to start the clock.
Not making it. Let's move on.
I was wondering about procedure here. There was a meeting, October 15th, and we're having a meeting November 5th. When did all these changes get done? I understand we're supposed to have a public forum for the changes. I didn't see any posted. Did you people meet without the public forum? Did you meet at someone's house? Or, I don't know. It's a question I have about how these changes came about. And to the ladies' point, we feel there's not any clarity here. There's not any, there's not enough of you people trying to make a clear description of exactly what your changes are. You can't stand up and say, this is how the zoning was, and this is the way we're changing it now. Either you, Mr. Chairman, or members of your committee should be able to do that. And you shouldn't be avoiding questions. You know, we're taxpayers, we're residents of the community, just like everyone else. So, you know, I think there should be a lot more visibility and clarity here. And I definitely agree with the lady. The other question I had, I know I'm not supposed to ask questions, but you talk about warehouses down in that area by Canole Pond, and you have a site on it. Let me get to that. And that's a pristine area, it's a conservation area, and it says, warehouse storage, wholesale sales, and indoor storage. So I don't know what that means. We can have a flea market down there, but at any rate, you have an S there. So that means site plan, I believe. We would have to have a site plan. Do you think that could be changed to SE, special exemption? Because that is really a conservation area, the West Rock State Park, so I think that when we put a building up there, it should be able to have a hearing by the public.
Where is it?
It's on table 3, allowed uses by zone, and it says 33VV, UU, 33UU, warehouse storage, wholesale sales with indoor storage, page 22. So you have S there, which I believe is site plan. Can we change that to at least a special exemption so that we can have some sort of a input by the people in the area? And again, I think before anything's done, you know, the people should be informed and actually included in the process. I know we've had meetings, but you can hear from what people here are saying, they don't actually feel they've been included in the process. So I know there was a suggestion made that possibly you could get some people on the board from that area, or do something that Dorothy Martino did years ago with the other folks down there that were on the committee, the last CPC committee. They had many people that allowed the 55 and over housing to be built down there. So I think that's the point. We just want to be included in the process. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else that would like to speak? This time we're going to close our hearing. And go into our work session. Last down, because I think it's I agree with you, change those to special setbacks. Your question about Dev 1 and Dev 2, the only residential that's allowed on Dev 1 right now is what's been approved in the 55 and over housing. So it's in there by special exception. So it's not like if they leave, somebody else can come in and do the same thing. Just for clarification. They do refer to accessory apartments as in-law apartments, and that's why they have the square footages. The in-law apartments and accessory apartments, just for the commission's knowledge, is actually twice what we have. Orange has in-law apartments, 700 square feet. Most towns are 700 to 800 square feet. We're calling for 350. We're calling for a one-room accessory in-law apartment at 350 square feet. And 2 rooms will be 425 square feet. And 3 rooms will be 600. 600 is still less than like what Orange has, is like over, which is 700. And a number of towns are actually larger than that. Usually an in-law apartment consists of a bedroom, a living space, kitchen, and a bathroom. That's pretty much it. I don't know what you prefer at 600 square feet, which isn't very much. So that's where those numbers came up from, and that was going. We looked at all of this. We discussed the higher numbers and make sure that this is the numbers we picked.
One question, should there be a definition of accessory apartment?
Can you speak up, because I can't hear you?
Accessory use.
Accessories, but should there be a definition of accessory apartment?
There could be.
Yeah, that might make it clear. It has accessory building and accessory dwelling.
Yeah, there's no accessory
Part
apartment.
of it. Oh, no, so not dwelling, accessory use. Well, but I think that's what we're building a portion thereof. Right?
So what was the question?
Whether we should add accessory apartment as a definition. It sounds like it's already included in accessory use.
What page is that?
The definition is on page 6.
Well, that is-
Table is on page 4.
That is the assumption,
Right.
but it needs more clarification.
Yeah. The use slash.
It might be helpful to just have it in there, even if it's redundant, I think it would make it more clear. People would be comfortable with it.
The flip side of that, though, the definition of accessory dwelling unit is written in the subsection of, 3A, right? The very definition of it. If you're looking for what the definition of it is right there. So you put everything that needs a definition at the front. I mean, that may be something that's needed, but.
So, just to be clear, is an accessory dwelling unit also an accessory apartment? They are, they're one and the same. Yes, so maybe we could just say that.
Are there accessory uses that are other than dwelling units?
Well, people can have offices in their house.
And
So they could come for permission to put an office in the accessory. Let's see the thing here that says.
Said what?
Well, there isn't any density. Again, there's no density in dead one because
No, but also it says A1. A is not.
well,
rating max? Why?
Well, there's a maximum density in the second.
That's max.
Well, that's all that you're allowed.
Oh, this is in terms of density.
In density B,
This is actually
2.9 or 0.6. There's no minimum. This is it.
So really, it's something.
You could do something small, but no one's going to tell you how small it has to be. That's why that says that.
As opposed to why.
The GBA is the overlay, and so we know what that is, and those maximum units, 650 square feet. Again, that one is medium density because it's by special permit, goes in 55 in there. And
Conforms, non-conforming. That's lethal. We should have done this.
Let me ask the question about affordable housing. We don't, affordable housing, but the affordable housing that's in the areas on our regs is given to us. We didn't write this. So it's what it is. And to be honest with you, I don't know what control of this stuff. I mean, one of the things we've been trying to do is,
My benefit has been
one of the reasons I'm trying to encourage apartments around town is so that someone can come in and build an affordable project in one spot. It is, if you have small units, and you're going to meet some, just, you require them to meet a certain threshold, we haven't met the threshold, but that's not what we want, so.
Mr. Chairman, the affordable housing, when you read that section, says that someone who wanted to do it would need to come in, and in any zone, they would make an application to have it fit in there.
Yeah.
I believe
I
that,
was just trying to make it clear that we didn't write that.
no, I understand that.
No, I was just explaining to the rest of the commission.
Okay, because the question was, why wasn't it listed in one of the, the use tables here, but in the section that deals with affordable housing, it specifically says that you would make an application to have it in a particular zone. So currently, it's not in any particular zone. I believe what Mr. Falsigno was referring to was on page 21, at least with regard to nursing homes. Currently, it's listed as a special exception under GB. It's actually an allowed use in Dev 1, so that should be corrected. And under congregate communities...
It has it in here. It's under Dev 1.
It's under,
No, it's nursing home is under, the first line nursing home
Oh, I see what you're saying.
is under GB, and that should be under Dev 1. And congregate communities / assisted living is not noted as being anywhere, but it's currently in both B and Dev 1, so it needs to be included there.
Which one?
The third one down, congregate communities and assisted living, is currently an allowed use in both residential B and Dev 1.
You're just telling me it's a site plan review? That's what you're saying, Chris?
He was questioning,
So you're telling me it's a site plan review because it's allowed? Or is
I'm
it-
saying that it needs to be identified as a use, because currently it's not identified as being a use in any district.
But is it site plan or special permit?
It was always a special permit, it always had a
Yeah,
hearing.
that's what I thought.
From a staff perspective, we had one question. Under the site plans, waivers of requirements that are listed are now solely with the commission itself.
Which page is that, Chris? Which page?
Oh, I'm sorry. You need to add an index.
Chris, special exceptions on the application, page 105.
Yeah, but it was the regular site plans.
Oh,
Because currently, the zoning enforcement officer can waive some of the requirements, and the only reason I was bringing it up was in the case of something where they would need a waiver from you, they would need to either come and ask the waiver first before they prepare the site plan, or, sometimes site plans come in, not everything that's being required is necessary for a specific site plan. But you can always, I guess, amend these after.
I think we should leave it the way it is. We can come back and cover it when we get better wording if that helps. But I think the way it is now works. One of the reasons that's in there is because a lot of the site plans get approved and then they're not necessarily enforced according to what the commission approved, which is why that's in there.
Page 106. 106. I thought it was 1.1.
Okay, is there any?
I think the question is
Site plan.
No, excuse me, I know it's a working session, but it would be nice if you could hear what you were saying. I mean, we're all
Okay,
here.
no problem.
Please.
Could you repeat it?
except
We were talking about the site plan.
Right.
The question that's Chris is saying, I'm just referring to the fact that we approve the site plans or leaving it the way it is, because a lot of times we approve site plans and they aren't necessarily enforced when they're actually completed. So that's why that's in there. Sure, sorry.
somebody asked, he said something about affordable housing.
Yeah, what we talking about?
Oh,
What was the?
Ken.
Yes, so what was the?
Ken.
Yeah, one of them doesn't have any, like,
Acronyms.
no, it's not this one.
Residential tenants? It's
Yeah, that's the
residential
one, it's
tenants.
residential tenant.
And there's nothing on it at all.
That's the also looked out.
Some of them are not really long. So if it's not on there, it means that we've addressed it. If somebody comes to us, like with a hotel, for instance, it's a hotel, but we don't have anything, it's because it's not allowed. We don't want to encourage hotels.
We still can't hear.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so some of the items like hotels, we don't necessarily want to encourage hotels. So that's why but we listed in here so that it's known that we've addressed it. The regs address it. Like, and that's one of the problems we've been having all along is a lot of times people will come, examples, tattoo parlors, gun shops, saying, all of those things, but because we don't address them in our regulations, we were forced to shoot from the hip at the last second, as opposed to planning ahead. So the idea is we're listing hotels, we don't really want hotels, so we've thought about hotels, we've chosen not to have them.
And that's why there's nothing.
That's why there's nothing in any of the
In
zones.
any of the lines. And the same thing with residential kennels. If you look at the line, there's nothing, because we don't want residential kennels. So it's not permitted in any district.
With all due respect, I believe a residential kennel is a permit that's given by the town clerk to people who have more than a specific number of private dogs. And it's not necessarily a kennel where people come and kennel dogs. But it's something that rather than getting a dog license for a single dog, that you get a kennel license if you have, say you're breeding a specific kind of dog, and you have more than a certain number, then you get a kennel license. That's a private kennel license.
So we can go back and look at that. What we're trying to avoid is people being allowed to have 10 animals on their property, all in any zone.
I have kennel licenses in my office. I have 3 kennels. 3 people in town that have kennel licenses.
They can have up to 10 dogs.
And what?
They can have up to 10 dogs in their house. So I don't know if that's going to affect your regulations. But they're state kennel licenses.
So we'll look at that. Because then I'm curious about if it's allowed, if it can be allowed in place or can we restrict it?
So that it's only their own animals as opposed to third party, i.e. a commercial kennel, I should
Can you speak out loud so people can hear you?
So
Please.
Kathleen is saying that according, if you go by the definition, that what you said, it could be put any place. And I'm saying we should go back and see what the state requires and what's allowed, and then change it accordingly.
Because they're state licenses.
So what does that mean? Is there anything else?
Just a general comment. The gentleman said that we have any secret meetings or ones that are not public. Throughout this process, I can assure you, there was not one meeting that was held in private. Any meeting to discuss the zoning regulations was noticed or public session.
Any notices for meeting between October 15th and this meeting?
I believe the changes were made as a consequence of the comments that were made at the last meeting.
I understand, but it was made in a public forum.
On site, that evening, those changes were.
You know,
That was after we left.
No.
No, it was at the,
Any changes that were made from comments at these meetings.
But when you're talking amongst yourself up there, we can't hear what you're talking about. At many of these meetings, usually after we speak and after everything calms down, then all you get together and you discuss things up there. We have no idea what's going on, what you're talking about. So even though they may be saying that, oh, well, you were all present. Presence doesn't mean anything. We don't hear the conversation among you. You're the ones that we came here to listen to. So if we don't hear that conversation, we're out of the loop.
And you also said you were going to answer questions at the last meeting, and you're not answering questions tonight.
The last meeting was out of control.
That's not what I said. At the last meeting, you said you would answer questions at this meeting. As soon as this meeting started, you said, I'm not answering any questions.
It was out of control the last meeting.
That's not what I said. I said,
That's what I'm saying.
well, what you said at the last meeting was, let me just repeat myself, I'll talk slow. You said you were going to answer questions at this meeting. Don't shake your head at me. You said you were going to answer questions at this meeting.
Number one.
I am being civil too, but you're not answering my question. You don't want to answer questions for anyone tonight. And that's not fair. We are taxpayers in this town, and we all came here, we come to all the meetings, and you won't answer our questions. And you're turning your head and ignoring me. Just like you're doing to everybody in this room. Very rude.
There was another question about how much the consultant costs, and I believe she was $12,000.
Yeah. I don't want to leave it that.
What happened? We run out of time?
I'll put it forward.
Was there anything
We're still in our work session.
I got a question. Who represents the people from the flats on this board? Does anyone live down there? Does anyone own property down there?
Okay, so listen.
Oh, there we go.
One of the reasons this meeting just gets out of control. People get mean, they get nasty, they get personal. It's not cool.
Look in the mirror.
Excuse me.
Look in the mirror.
Okay. Okay, I'm kind of done, so I'm not gonna answer the
So,
question.
okay.
I don't think anybody's getting out of hand. Why can't you just listen to us?
We are listening.
Well, I-
Anybody up here can answer the question.
Okay, Andy, I have a question for you.
Yes, Mary Ellen.
Do you honestly feel that this committee is being run fairly and answering questions? And anything to do with us, I know you well. Do you honestly think this is the way we want to get? Do you think Pete is anything other than being an ignoramus to all of us?
Well, I'm respectfully not going to respond to that, Mary Ellen, but I can tell you that based on all of the comments that were made at the last meeting a few weeks ago, those changes were made to the proposed draft. Nothing was added. All of the comments were taken into consideration, and things were taken out based on that, so that the questions that were raised were effectively addressed in that way. I'm not going to get into...
And do you feel that it's fair not to answer questions, to come here tonight, to drag us all out here, say we would be able to answer questions, they would be answered, and then at the beginning of the meeting, just to say no questions will be taken? Half the questions tonight, just now, that she asked, you guys didn't even know the answers. Kennel, not kennel,
We answered every one of the questions.
what questions? We didn't answer questions tonight. You answered 0 questions.
Does everybody else think we didn't answer any questions?
When we went into the work session, we all taken notes on all the questions, and we answered, we addressed all of the questions.
I'm talking tonight.
I know, I am saying that I have my list here of all the questions that were asked, all the way to the end. And when we went into work session, we addressed every single one of those questions.
Okay, well, there's people here that didn't even ask the question because we were told we couldn't answer, you weren't taking questions. So how did you answer the questions when you didn't hear everybody?
Right.
I don't get that.
That's not right. And we can't hear you addressing the questions, that's a problem. And really,
I don't have a microphone.
That's the mic down.
Nobody can hear.
What happened with the petition? We could have asked.
Okay, so we can talk, we did get another page from the petition. We're not going to do anything with the petition because the petition is just a petition, but unless it's an application actually requesting us to do what the petition says, we don't address it.
Again, that was addressed at the last meeting, and it was like, yes, at this meeting.
Okay, I'm addressing it now.
Are the signatures town residents?
I didn't go through all of them, but it looks like it. I mean, I haven't really reviewed them, but it looks like it. It looks
Or
like it.
business owners in town. One of the others.
Yeah.
Not necessarily residents.
No, not necessarily residents.
I don't know, I didn't go through all of it, but.
Are your zoning regulations are they supposed to, the new ones, supposed to make conforming properties non-conforming?
Excuse me?
Well, I found an area where you're making my property non-conforming when it's conforming. Page 23. Veterinary hospitals. My veterinary hospital has an outdoor enclosure, and I'll explain why that was put there. That was put there for safety. So, one thing that's happened in veterinary hospitals is if technicians walk people's animals outside an enclosure and they get lost, they often get off the leash, they can get lost and killed. And when I designed my veterinary hospital, I purposely built a nice, attractive fence. It's an enclosure. We don't keep animals there, but we let them out to go to the bathroom for their protection. And you're making my property non-conforming by outlawing that. I don't understand why.
Well, in any event, you would have a pre-existing non-conforming use and it would not.
But why would you change that? It doesn't make any sense. It's a safety feature. So you're not thinking it through very carefully. I put that in specifically for safety. Can someone tell me why that would be there?
Problem is because I thought that the noise from the animals.
No, it's not, animals don't stay outside. I've never had a noise complaint.
No, I'm not saying you did it,
Yeah,
but there's a reason behind it, i.e. neighbors and trying to keep noise down. Now, you may object to it, and which is perfectly reasonable, and maybe in retrospect, looking it over, maybe it doesn't belong.
It doesn't.
There was a reason for it, that's all.
I'm just saying, it makes my existing
Oh, no, I
facility
understand.
non-conforming, and it
Totally
makes no
understand.
sense.
I totally understand. Not arguing.
Yeah, so that needs to be changed, because we've never had, I've been there for over now 8 years. I never, ever had a noise complaint, and I have homes right across the street.
I'm not saying you.
No, I'm just saying how it works in reality.
I understand.
And it's there totally for people's pet safety. So that's an example where you guys need to fix that. That doesn't make sense. It's a safety procedure.
I'll verify that. I live directly across the street from Dr. Broderick's veterinary hospital, and there's never any noise coming from there. There's more noise coming from the dog pound.
Maybe there should be hours of usage such as the noise regulations, that only go from a certain hour in the morning to a certain hour at night, that the animals could be outside free range, which would conform to his business hours. So it couldn't be a model.
We of course want to be good neighbors. We're not, we agree with your reasoning for not having
I mean,
noise.
but there was a reason.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just saying why I had it.
Oh,
And I want you guys to take in the reality of situations, if you're gonna put that in the regulation. Because that's a good safety feature, people love it. I mean, I don't think you wanna make conforming properties non-conforming.
We can either take it out, or,
Now, see, you're talking, we can't hear you, Mr. Kaufman.
I'm asking him, what exactly does he want to take out?
just the outside enclosures for them. The crematorium. Page 23H. H1.
Right.
Veterinary hospital.
So deleting the number one in its entirety, is that what you're saying?
You want the prohibition against a crematorium remains just the outside enclosure, I believe.
That's correct.
So just from, or any outside enclosure for animals.
Well, it's kind of a contradiction, because you talks about the fence.
Does your hospital include a crematorium?
No.
Do you know of others in similar towns in Connecticut that
I
do?
think they might have in the past, but most veterinarians that I know have services that pick up the animals' bodies. And so I think that was kind of an antiquated thing, but that's okay, I guess, to have there, because it's kind of gross.
Did you find any other sections in the proposed revised regulations that you had objections to?
Yeah.
All right, the chair will hear them.
There are a few others. I'll turn to the page.
So just so I'm clear, we are not allowed to ask questions? Or not?
If it could stay civil.
So now the group can ask questions?
Okay.
Yep.
The other thing I had a question on was the zoning districts and boundaries and what's allowed. That's page 3.
Sorry, what page did you say?
Page 3, administration. So one thing I had a question about that I don't think is currently allowed is Special District 1, Dev 2. It says limited residential in apartment style. What does that mean? Does that mean allowing apartments in Dev 2?
There's some units.
Right now, I know it's all commercial. I don't understand what that means.
Thought it was from the original regs. That's not something we changed or added.
No, there were no residential uses ever allowed in Dev 2.
Right. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it's referenced.
For the Dev 1 developments, it says commercial and limited residential uses, but there's no listed in the chart.
We're having some trouble here, but just so I'm clear, there are no residential allowances in Area 2
Dev 2, yeah, development.
in the current regulations, is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct, thank you.
So on page 3, that was my first question, on Dev 1 and Dev 2, it talks about residential uses, but in the chart, it just says.
So I answered the question about Dev 1. Dev 1, the only residential is Dev 1 is the special exception, that was for the 55 and over.
Okay,
55 and over doesn't get built unless somebody gives us another application. It's not for residential.
Right, but on your page 3, it says commercial and limited residential uses. It doesn't tell you what it's limited to, and when you go to the chart, since it says NA, there's no way for anyone to know what it's limited to. It would be on
It requires an application.
But just to add to what Anthony's saying, you say limited residential style. Does that mean 50 units? Does that mean 100 units? What does that mean?
It's all by application.
So each application is going to be considered individually?
Right, so for instance, when they came to the board with the 55 and over, they gave a proposal for X number of units on that property.
Okay, but in the previous regulation, it would not even allowed to come test.
You're always allowed to apply for it. You're always allowed to submit an application for anything.
I just think when you leave it open-ended with an NA.
You're not leaving it open, it's an application.
Okay.
And
But it
there's
doesn't say that in the definition of the chart. It doesn't say by application. Maybe you should put by application. It just says not applicable.
Pretty much everything in here can be done. I mean, anybody, affordable
But
housing.
why
can do
just those
Listen to what I'm
issues?
saying, listen to what I'm saying.
Listen to what we're saying. We heard what you're saying. And I'm just saying there are 3 simple basic areas of your chart that have NA, that aren't really NA. NA, meaning not applicable, is not what your page 3 says. And I'm just saying, figure a way to make them both compatible. And if that means in your chart it says by application only, then so be it. It's at least spelled out and it's the same. But when page 3 says something very different, regardless of everybody's interpretation, then page, whatever that number, I'll tell you what that page is right now.
58.
58, correct.
Hold on, please.
It's just very different that it says NA, which means not applicable, and page 3 spells it out as there are uses for it. There are residential uses. So if there's not, I suppose it should say there's not, or at least, as Jeff says, by application. I just don't think it doesn't match. B1, B1, Development 1, and Develop 2 have NA. But yet, when you go back to page 3, it says there are uses. And I'm just saying, those 2 terms don't match. Either they're not applicable, or they're sometimes applicable. Which seems to be what you're saying, is by application or sometimes applicable. On page 3, the beginning of your document, 1.0 administration, spells out your zones. But then the chart just seems to miss those 3. But the rest of the chart is filled out for the other regulations in those districts. Every other, actually I think every other category has a number. Whether it's setback, whether it's rear setback, side setback. But the density is missing. And I'm just saying, why? Why not put by application only or by approval only?
So in Dev 2,
yeah,
there isn't any residential allowed. And we need to take it out of the beginning of the definition. So the reason it's not applicable is because there isn't any residential allowed.
Okay, so it's wrong on Big Street, go remove
Dev
it.
1, there also isn't any residential allowed. The only reason we have any residential in there now is because we have an application that came before us. If that application dies off, it's back to, it's not applicable, but there's no density because we don't allow it in there.
That's not true. Because you have uses that are allowed in there which are residential, which is assisted living, and also the active adult, which is what was approved, is a type of use which is allowed in that zone, whether or not that permit expires. It's a use that's an allowed use. So you have 2 allowed uses, actually 3, because you have nursing homes that is also residential, that's allowed in that district. So you have nursing homes, assisted living, and active adult over 55.
But we don't have a density for those things.
That may be, but you have, it's not correct to say you don't have residential uses. Excuse me, let me finish. That you do not have residential uses in that particular district because you do. And I think part of the problem that you've got in that particular line is that's a line that was added that wasn't in your regulations before. So whether you choose to keep dwelling units per acre because it's dictated by what your acreage requirements are, it's in the active adult, it says you can't have more than 10 per acre. In the assisted living, it tells you how many units you can have. So it's set forth within those separate little sections. So
in the regulations.
In the regulations. So it might be a way to eliminate the issue if you just struck that line of dwelling units per acre, because it's determined by what the other requirements are within the zoning regs, if that makes sense.
It has to be consistent.
Right. May I just ask if, in light of some of the things that you're hearing tonight, that perhaps you go back and this document get refined a little bit better, and we have another meeting in 2 weeks where you allow the public to come and ask questions after they can review. This obviously needs a little bit of refinement. And all I'm asking you to do is to have an open mind, go back and put a little more detail in these regulations that are going to help protect us. I mean, I've lived here all my life, and I don't want to see anything happen to this town. So please, consider going back in a couple of weeks, have another meeting, open it up to the public, let the public ask questions, and let's do it right. I mean, we all live, in this town. We all want the best.
Well, can I just ask again for this clarity? I mean, did you want development 2 to have residential uses?
I just said it's in there as an error, so we'll take it.
Okay. No, thank you for clarifying. And one other area that I brought up last time that I really think you guys should change and fix is GDA. GDA is the area that you've allowed apartments that nobody seems to, you guys couldn't give me an answer last time. Why we need it. One application's approved, I understood, but you don't need to have that. Nobody really wants it. It allows apartments that people don't want. So you should change GDA to no residential uses.
Yes.
That really needs to change. And I think we also ought to change our plan of conservation and development to reflect that. Would you like me to cite the area you should change?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm not really that interested. I already know what the POCD said.
Well, why wouldn't you be interested in...
Why don't you let me finish? We had a lot of meetings. We had a lot of meetings for the POCD. People gave their opinion, their input. People said they wanted those things in those areas. That's why we put them in the POCD, and that's why we have the GBA open.
Well, that's not reflective of what you're saying.
Were those public meetings?
Oh, yes.
I mean, people here are so concerned about that, and you should actually care what people think. You're supposed to be representing us.
Where do you advertise your meeting?
The meetings are the same Monday every month.
First Monday, 7:30.
And they are posted on the town government website. But it's the same, it's the first Monday every month. And every meeting is a public meeting.
But the big changes that were made were not really thoughtfully put in front of the town for consideration. That's my problem. And you can say that you reference them in the register, but as we talked about, that's an antiquated way to let the town know what you're doing. And you need to think of a better way to do that. You know, the changes we're asking for in this are not huge. People like most of what's in here, I think, but you need to actually recognize why people are so upset about GBA. That's just not good for this town. And because nobody could tell me why apartments were so wonderful, I think that's indicative that they aren't.
How would the commission like to move forward? Because we've got a list of changes here. This isn't etched in stone. I mean, it's a working document. As things come up, that's how we change things. Right now, the regulations we have are embarrassingly antiquated. And that's the reason we're doing what we're doing. But I don't know how the rest of the commission feels. We have a list of things that, as we've at other meetings, taken people's input and changed things accordingly. We've done the same thing tonight. So I don't know what people say. What do you want to do? I mean,
I think we should incorporate the changes that were discussed tonight and have one more meeting, perhaps at our first Monday in December meeting.
And I really think you need to listen to about the GBA, because I think that's really disturbed a lot of people here. And I know you took out the other areas that people didn't like. That was great. And I know you worked hard to revise and update on some of the other things. Those are good, but listen what the public doesn't like.
I will say that we listened at 4 or 5 different public
Right,
hearings.
but there's no response to it.
And we incorporated most.
Why don't you incorporate all? You
Because
know,
we make the slide
you
out.
hear somebody here standing up that they want apartments in GBA?
We could disagree one item or another with the people that spoke, but we listened for a long time, and we incorporated.
But
by
who's
and
saying they
large
want
all.
that?
When we had, when we had the town plan, we had all sorts of charrettes, we had all sorts of meetings, and a lot of people came to that and expressed their opinion. A lot of people who are not here. And because they're not here, we don't just disregard their opinions and what they thought, correct? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But a lot of people don't know what you've done with that.
But the point is, we didn't do it from whole cloth. We didn't come up with it ourselves. We had the charrettes, I think, how many days did we have? I don't
None of
remember.
us knew about it, and we informed people of
But
that.
it was advertised in various places. It was in the library, it was on the town website. I mean, we can't send out personal notices to everybody in town.
But you should, the people that are directly affected.
No, everybody is directly affected.
No, everybody.
The entire town is directly, see, that's the point. You're getting back to Woodbridge 1 and Woodbridge 2. And everybody, but it's still one, no, it's still one, it's Woodbridge 1.
But it doesn't affect the
It
entire
affects
town.
everybody in
No, it
town.
doesn't.
Okay, wait. Alan, it sure does, because it affects our school systems.
Exactly.
And with all due respect, wait 1 second.
I totally agree.
But
I
Alan,
totally
I
agree.
came to those charrettes, and I asked you, and I'm on record, on tape, asking this commission, please, bring in the Board of Education,
bring in the police chief. I asked you to bring in Frank Capiel. I asked you to bring in Sean Rowan, our fire department chief.
That
And the
actually is
reason
how
for
you write regulations.
And the reason for that is that's who knows best about what changes in zoning you did in GB1 on Hazel Terrace, for example, how that may affect, because that road is only so wide, because there is a dance school up there and there are cars coming on. There are multiple reasons. And it may affect the police, fire, and Board of Ed more than it affects anything else in town. And there are experts. They're the people we pay. They're the people who know best. And I begged you, bring them in. Let's hear their opinions. But I'm sorry, this commission did not do that publicly. And I asked you for that in this plan and way back before Mr. Urbano got his approval. So I get that you heard a lot of people, but why didn't you hear it from the experts?
Right.
These are the people we pay in town to be our experts.
And we paid a consultant $12,000, but we can't bring in police, fire, EMS, and the school board to give an opinion is beyond me. That's free.
Opinion on what? The entire zoning regulation?
Excuse me.
No, I'm
When you're
serious
talking
on
about
why.
changing density.
No, no.
When you're talking about changing density, it's going to affect our schools, it's going to affect the police department, the fire department, and EMS.
Well, you know, we have also a lot of our elected officials. I just want to make this point. We have our first selectman here today, Beth Heller, and we have a lot of other people concerned. If this is such a popular idea, GBA having apartments, why don't we have a town referendum, you know, to okay that? And then Mr. Hoffman can prove that that's such a popular idea. I would bet that would lose big time in a referendum. As a matter of fact, it will go down in flaming defeat. And you know, if you are not willing to listen to this group, put that to a
I'm not saying we're not
referendum.
listening. We've listened.
You shouldn't make a zoning change like that that's so controversial without having more people in the town knowing about it. And not enough people know about it. Unfortunately, the people who know about it are the most directly affected. And that's kind of sad. You know, because you don't slip things through in zoning. You're supposed to be representing us.
You know, this time Beth had it in her bulletin that she sends out that this meeting was being held tonight and at the time and the place. That was very helpful. So if it could be in something like that where we all receive it, that would be helpful.
Also, Christine put up T signs in some of the area most affected, and that was very helpful. But that's the first.
I apologize for the size of the lettering. That wasn't my jurisdiction.
If we could get a list of everyone's emails, we could send this out. We have a town blast. We can send it out weekly, daily, anything. You guys leave your emails on a piece of paper.
But I would really like to see the town, if they want to make this huge zoning change that they've made in a way that I think was not where the whole town was informed very well, because of the way that meetings are noticed today. And I really think the town should think about, we need to have a more effective way of noticing people to major zoning changes, because this is not reflective of what most people in this town want. I am absolutely certain. I talk to people every day in my clinic that live in Woodbridge. I have not heard one person. I've asked every single one, do you want apartments in Woodbridge? Every single one has said no. Not one has said yes.
I haven't found one person to say yes.
So, you know, this is not a very good document if it's not reflecting the interests of the town.
But Michael, they are changing. They are changing. So this is good. They have listened to us. I think if you had given us a list of what you changed from the original zoning regulations, there wouldn't have been all this controversy because we could see everything. We can't see it all. It's hard to compare the old regulations to the new regulations. And I find that to be a big problem. But they are changing. And hopefully, if we say enough, we see enough. I'm not an expert on the regulations. I went through them. I found what I could, but they are very confusing. And to see the difference between one old regulation and the new regulation would have been very helpful, and it would still be very helpful. So
Hopefully you'll postpone your vote and give it a little more consideration.
And yet, if you want to make a change like that, I understand you did it for now, but it shouldn't be that the whole town is affected for one application. And you know, you need to be more cognizant of what people in this town want.
I mean, we spent $12,000, spend money to advertise to let us know when they're gonna bid.
That's your first soul.
Well,
Okay.
we can't do that every single time.
No, not every single time, when they were the major meetings.
It's hard once you set a
There's
precedent.
major
Something
zoning.
major like this, major.
My aunt doesn't miss a meeting, she's been
No, I know.
involved in the
I'm
town
trying to go to.
for 100 or 75 years. She's 80-something, she doesn't miss a meeting. She missed the meetings because she had no idea they were there. Someone who's informed and goes to all the meetings.
And I think we really should revisit our plan of conservation and development that even allows that. It's just not what people, this town was created by very careful planning and zoning. There's no other town in Woodbridge, like Woodbridge, in the whole state of Connecticut, that's a first-rate suburb that has the kind of setup that we have in this town with large lots right next to the city. And we really want to keep it the way it is, and we don't want major changes. We don't mind you updating things, but we don't want a huge change that can affect us from a tax point of view, certainly an aesthetic point of view, etc. And that's what you're giving us, and we don't like it. And so, yes, you should go back and fix your plan of conservation and development and make the new zoning regs correspond to it.
And will you be able to make the changes that we told you about tonight too?
Yeah, I think many of them have been made as we've been discussing them tonight.
And actually, one last comment, I don't know if 12,000 is the right figure, that is the total accrued by the consultant. That goes back almost 3. I don't think the 12,000 may be the accurate number since the inception, but this goes back almost 3 years, and in fairness to Beth, it was not Beth who approved it, it was the board, and she was not the first elected at that time. So,
I believe
there
that
been
is the
since-
number, and it was 3
That's okay,
years.
we can check with Tony Jenkins, but
I agree.
I believe it's been on 3 years, so it's not been this year.
There was only one contract.
Why is it that the board is so adamant to push this proposal through over the wishes of the people? I'm just curious, I mean, you guys all seem to want it, and we all seem not to want it, but you're fighting to get it against the people that's gonna affect.
There are other people that live in this town that
Where the hell are they?
Where are they?
Who's
they don't have to come to every meeting.
Well, what do they do, call you out?
Where are they?
Give you a house number, I'll call you.
That's what we did up here, CB before.
And how did you contact the people that gave you the input that they wanted this? Who are these people, and how did you contact them? I know everybody that lives in the area. I don't know any one person that got any kind of contact. So you sent out an email list that belonged down in Skeletor. And it went to those people. So it must be some of those people that want it. Don't tell me to be quiet, I'll say what I want. And I'm trying to help get the word out with Facebook. We're trying our best. It says you don't have the money to help out, to let the people know. Where did you get these people that want it? Where are
Actually, we had a couple hundred people show up.
they? Oh, yeah?
Yes.
You had a couple hundred people jump. Where are they?
Scream.
I'm talking loud. I talk loud.
Do not scream.
Get the cop to take me out with their handcuffs.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Pizza.